All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Select Committee for Government Oversight. So glad to have this all-star team to review important information that relates to our state. Today is focusing on SNAP benefits, but before we dig into that, again, thank you for coming. And I'd like to just begin with our committee and staff introductions. We have, again, not just an all-star committee, but also an all-star staff. So we'll start with our staff, with our revisers first.
Jill Walters, first assistant revisor at the Revisor Statutes.
Good afternoon, Jenna Moyer, and I'm an assistant revisor statutes.
Jason Long, senior assistant revisor.
Jacob Klesby, I'm a legislative fellow with KLRD.
And then Amanda Prosser, fiscal analyst with Legislative Research.
Committee assistant.
And I'm Dylan Deere. I'm the assistant director for fiscal affairs.
And our AV.
Dusty Ralston, audiovisual department.
Awesome. Great to have you all today. Thank you for being here. And for our committee, I am Chairman Christy Williams and Chairwoman. And I'll just go around the room and just everybody introduce yourselves.
I'm Representative Bob Lewis.
Hi, Susan Humphreys from Wichita.
Representative Tom Sawyer from Wichita.
Representative Troy Waymaster.
And Representative Osmond, are you online?
Yes, I am. Representative Osmond from Overland Park and the Internet.
Great to have you.
Representative Barbara Ballard, Lawrence.
Representative Francis A. Camp from St. Mary's, Potawatomi County.
Representative Will Carpenter.
I'm Joella Hoy, House District 17 out of Lenexa.
Representative Bill Sutton, District 43.
Representative Shannon Francis, the Liberal Republican.
All right, we've got it. That's right. Committee, we're going to just, well, and we have one more. He's late, but definitely welcome. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, Sean Tarwater, District 27, Stillwell. Thanks for having me, and sorry I'm late.
All right, we're ready to go. So we're going to just jump right into it and make sure that we make the most of our couple hours together. And we're going to first have our revisers review what this select committee is and our just the basic function of what we'll be doing. Thank you, Jill.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Williams and members of the committee. My name is Jill Walters, and I am just reviewing with you how a select committee is comprised and who appoints it. So a select committee may be appointed by the Speaker pursuant to House Rule number 1103, the President pursuant to Senate Rule 8, or by resolution, a House or Senate resolution, or by concurrent resolution pursuant to KSA 46-1205C. Any guidelines of the Select Committee are assigned by the appointing authority. So in this instance, the Speaker would establish the guidelines in the letter appointing the Select Committee or in another message to members of the committee. And the same would be true for the President. For a Select Committee established by a resolution or a concurrent resolution, the statute states that the resolution itself would specify the manner in which the membership of the committee would be selected, all of which would be legislators. Any such resolution or concurrent resolution shall also specify the subject to be studied, the time the report is to be made thereon, and the manner of selection of the chair and vice chair. And then any other, the statute specifically says, any other specificity of incidents related to the procedure of the study would not be specified there. And then just for your reference, I cut and pasted the exact language of the rules and the exact language of that statute for the Select Committee, their subsection C. And I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Jill. Committee, any questions about our Select Committee? Yes, Representative Humphreys.
Do we have the letter that from the Speaker organizing the select committee?
I have a copy, ma'am, but I did not make copies for the committee. But of course, we would be able to do that for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would resend it to us.
Okay.
We probably all received it at some time, but it's buried in our emails, so that'd be great to have that with us. Any other questions? And thank you, Jill. And I would just remind you that we are coming together as a select committee on the call of LCC, and that is going to be based on issues that might be forthcoming that they would like us to take a close look at and to highlight. We are not here to create drafts of bills, but we are here to just really shine a light on any issues that are of high importance. All right, so there's no regular schedule with that. The next item would be the committee rules, and you may notice there are no committee rules, so it's free-for-all. No, it's not free-for-all, but we are going to just maintain our House committee rules, which are uniform throughout our committees, and if we are called again by the LCC and there's any need for any other type of rules, we will do so at that time. And since not today is our first day, we're just going to run on existing rules. Any questions on that? Excellent. We're all well acquainted with those. And so let's go ahead and talk about the reason that we're here today. The reason that we are here is there is some concern relating to whether or not Kansas is in compliance with federal law related to SNAP. And since this has been an ongoing issue with many different parts to this issue, we wanted to take a little closer look at that. And so our plan today is to first have our revisers review some relevant statutes, and then to have KLRD walk us through some items that will also provide the context we need. For some, it's going to be old hats, you're very familiar. For others, it'll be a really good context for our discussion. Then we'll have representative from Department of Children and Families. And then finally, it'll be our opportunity to discuss and to add questions, both to those that are providing testimony, as well as those ongoing lingering questions that maybe aren't quite resolved in your mind and that we should consider in the future. So with that, I would go ahead and ask, is it Jill that's going to? Jenna. Jenna will provide our overview. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. You'll see in front of you a memo that we have prepared that I will be going over, and this will just be a general overview of Kansas statutes governing Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And the majority of requirements related to these programs are found in federal law and regulations, but there are a few state statutes found in Article 7 of Chapter 9 of the Kansas statutes, and I'll go over an overview of the relevant provisions of those statutes. The first one is KSA 39708C, and it grants the Secretary for Children and Families the authority to distribute food stamps, SNAP benefits given to Kansas for any purpose permitted by federal law. And I will note that in 2027, the next statute I'm going to talk about, or House Bill 2027, the statute KSA 39709, a reorganization of that statute that I'm going to be covering for the rest of this was reorganized. And so some of these references that are in here will change, but I wanted to give you the update on the current law. If we meet again after July, I'll update this memo with the correct cross-references. So KSA 39709, it's the primary statute governing SNAP benefits, which are referred to in state statutes as food assistance. The statute also covers the TANF, or temporary assistance to needy families, child care subsidies, and medical assistance, or Medicaid. Subsection A of this statute sets out the general eligibility requirements to receive federal assistance provided through DCF, under which federal monies are expended, and that would be that a needy person has insufficient income or resources to provide a reasonable subsistence compatible with decency and health, and that such person is either a citizen of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted to the United States residing in Kansas. Subsection B9 prohibits individuals who have not cooperated with TANF work programs from being eligible to participate in the food assistance program, and non-cooperation penalties would be applied to the individual who has failed to comply with the work programs, and these penalties range from 3 months to 10 years of ineligibility for food assistance. Subsection B11 prohibits individuals who have not cooperated with child support services from being eligible in the food assistance program unless such individual has good cause, and this would cover both custodial and non-custodial parents. Subsection B13 prohibits individuals who have been convicted of a state or federal felony offense involving manufacture, cultivation, distribution, possession, or use of a controlled substance from being provided food assistance. And that individual shall be permanently disqualified from receiving food assistance unless that individual completes a drug treatment program approved by the Secretary, passes a drug test, and agrees to future drug testing as required by the Department. Subsection B15 requires the Secretary to place a photograph of the recipient of benefits, if agreed to by such recipient, on the benefit card used to obtain assistance, which for food assistance would be the EBT card. B17 prohibits the Secretary from either requesting or implementing a waiver from the USDA requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents, sometimes referred to as ABODs, in a household under the food assistance program. The USDA requirements are that such adults, with some exceptions for students, parents of small children, individuals in drug or alcohol treatment programs, among others, to work at least 20 hours per week in a federally approved work program. And if a recipient does not meet these work requirements, they're ineligible to participate in the food assistance program and subject to penalties ranging from 3 months to 1 year of ineligibility. Subsection B18 limits eligibility for food assistance to individuals who are either citizens or meet non-qualified citizen status by the USDA. Non-citizens who do not provide qualifying immigration documentation shall not be included when determining a household size or benefit levels for food assistance, but the income of such disqualified individual shall be considered as an available asset to the household. Subsection B19 prohibits the Secretary from enacting broad-based categorical eligibility that's permitted by federal regulation for households applying for food assistance. B20 prohibits state and federal funds from being used to promote food assistance benefits or enrollment through advertisements like TV, radio, or billboards. B21 prohibits the Secretary from applying gross income and resource limit standards that are higher than the standards specified in the federal law. Subsection C1 requires the department to conduct an electronic check for false information provided on an application for assistance and to verify the identity of all adults in such assistance household. Paragraph 2 requires the Department of Administration to provide DCF the Social Security number or tax identification number of individuals who have claimed a lottery prize greater than $5,000 during the previous month. Subsection I prohibits an individual who has voluntarily quit employment, been fired for gross negligence, or is a fugitive from justice from being eligible to receive public assistance. And subsection K sets out the assignment of support rights to the Secretary of DCF for individuals receiving food assistance or any family members on behalf of whom the individual is applying for or receiving public assistance. And that is your general overview of the Kansas statutes. I will be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Jenna. I probably predict that most of our questions will be directed towards DCF, but are there any questions for our revisor on these items? All right, thank you, Jenna. Moving to KLRD, and we're going to go ahead and have our presentation. We have a packet that's presented and provided to us. So it looks like Amanda's going to walk us through that. And Amanda, when we move to each section, we might pause and see if there are any questions so that we don't just have too many all at the end. All right. So please direct us to which page we're looking at.
Absolutely. So hello, committee. I am Amanda Prosser with Legislative Research. I am actually the fiscal analyst who is responsible for analyzing and presenting the budget analysis for DCF, and certainly many of you know me in that role. Others of you on this committee are going to be much more familiar with my colleague, who's Iraida Orr. She's the KLRD research analyst who staffs many of the Health and Human Services committees, including House Committee on Welfare Reform. She had a couple of overlapping meetings. I think she's going to come in on WebEx if you have any questions for her. But to walk you through the packet of resources, the first one you're going to want to look at is the packet that has the yellow sheet on top. And that says House Committee on Welfare Reform 2025 session. Like I said, this is the topic, or this is the committee that Iraida staffs, and quite frankly has discussed today's topic quite a bit. And so in the packet are 2 items from that committee that might be helpful today, or just to have in your knowledge. One of them is a memo on DCF EES verifications. So this is a pretty comprehensive list of what DCF eligibility workers use when they're individuals applying for assistance through DCF. The second document in that packet has the KLRD header at the top. Again, we're looking at the packet that has the yellow sheet of paper on it. This is a memo that was provided to House Committee on Welfare Reform. It usually walks through it, and it just summarizes major welfare reform in Kansas over the past 10 years or so. Much of it has been covered by revisers, so I won't spend a whole lot of time in it. I would note that this memo does not include this past session's legislation, specifically House Bill 2217, which expands the scope of the Inspector General within the Office of the Attorney General's office to audit, investigate, and do performance reviews of all cash, food, and health assistance programs. So that is not in this memo, but otherwise everything else is HOPE Act, those kinds of things are going to be in there. Any questions about those documents?
Proceed.
Okay. The next one, again, I won't spend a lot of time on it, is a document that looks like this. This is a table of all the eligibility requirements for various programs offered by DCF. And on the back of page 1, it has the eligibility requirements for SNAP food assistance, if you're not familiar with those.
Continue.
Moving forward, you're going to have a colorful document that looks like this. This is the state options report. This is published by USDA's Food and Nutrition Services program. In some ways, this is a pretty handy report because it helps grasp what Kansas is doing compared to other states with regards to the policy options and waivers that are within SNAP. It's a federal publication. This is the most current report. And it contains federal data through federal fiscal year 23. So we'll expect a new report in the coming months, hopefully, but this is going to be the most current one. And as you flip through it, you're going to see all sorts of information regarding different policy options with SNAP, what Kansas is doing compared to what other states are doing. Okay. Now for the meat and potatoes. So this is the next document I'm going to review. It's got several tables and a chart on it. And this is the one that I've been asked to spend a little bit of time on. And it's titled SNAP Efficiency and Effectiveness Measures. So while DCF administers the state's food assistance program, the funding for the program runs through the federal farm bill. And because all of that goes through USDA is who has the quality control piece for SNAP. That includes both state and federal reviews of households participating and how they're receiving their benefits. In that quality control system, the data is used to calculate 4 measures that are on this piece of paper. All of that information is publicly available. There's a link or a typed out link which at the bottom of the page. If anyone ever has a desire to go look at that, you can. But as we go through them, you're going to see some gaps in the COVID years. You'll see a nice kind of white line down the chart. You'll see some gaps in data on the table. And that's a USDA thing. They just didn't do those indicators those couple of years. And you're also going to notice a general trend, not just for Kansas, but for the nation as a whole. And that that trend is that the program was performing quite a bit better prior to COVID. So all of these measures, you're going to see that the indicators get worse post-COVID compared to pre-COVID. So in no particular order, I'm going to start on page 1. That indicator is known as the Program Access Index. So in all of these charts, the red line is going to indicate Kansas, while the other lines show the surrounding states, and then that thick black bold line is representing the nation's information. And this particular indicator, it's more of a statistical concept. It's an index. It's meant to indicate the degree to which low-income people have access to SNAP benefits. So specifically, it compares a state's average monthly SNAP participation rate to the number of people living in a state below the 125% of the federal poverty line. And so here, in this particular one, you can see Kansas is ranked quite low compared to other states, which, depending on your views, can be seen as a positive or a negative. The payment error rate is the next graph and table. This measure suggests the state's accuracy when determining eligibility and payments. As you can imagine, there's a number of factors that can influence this indicator: unintentional mistakes made by workers, staff turnover, computer systems, et cetera. But certainly a lower payment error rate is preferred. And in all of these, I apologize, the text is very faint. You might consider, though, highlighting or circling the text kind of at the end. So on this one, it says a lower rate is preferred. And so that always helps my mind think, am I looking for a higher rate here? Am I looking for a lower rate here? And so in this particular one, we are looking for a lower rate. If you flip the page, the next measure is called the APTR, or Application Process Timeliness Rate. This measures how efficient the state is when processing applications. As I understand it, this measure really ties back to the original 2008 Farm Bill. In it, there's language that requires that all eligible households receive SNAP benefits within 30 days of application, most cases. And in the text above, you can again see that in this particular rate, a higher rate is preferred rather than a lower rate. And the last chart and table is displaying the case and procedural error rate. This rate assesses cases when a household is denied SNAP benefits or when the benefits have been submitted. It includes a review of whether or not decisions were accurate in the first place and whether or not notification of those decisions were communicated timely and clearly. And again, in this rate, the lower rate is preferred. And so these 4 rates are important. They're going to connect into the next piece that I'm going to have you guys look at. The next piece, the next document, is a letter in your packet. This was shared with me from a legislator. It's dated February 8th of 24. And this is from the USDA, addressed to Governor Kelly, urging Kansas to address the rates that I just described. When DCF comes up, they'll do a great job talking kind of about this and about the additional letters that followed. So for perspective, you might be asking yourselves, why are we looking at something from February of 2024? It's a bit ago. But since then, they have had additional letters. Another letter that you'll see in the DCF packet is dated in October of last year. It documents that while a corrective action plan was opened with USDA to address these rates, and that Kansas is required to submit a semi-annual update showing progression on those. Another letter in the DCF packet will come, and it's from January of this year, so that's kind of the most recent time point that I'm aware of, where a regional USDA office indicates that they received and accepted Kansas corrective action plan to address these rates and address these measures.
Okay, I will pause there and also note that there are copies provided for you with the state waiver request, as well as, which was just happened this year, as well as an article in CJ Online about why USDA is demanding more efficiency from Kansas in food stamp programs, which is the reason we're here. So we're going to pause a whole lot of information. I definitely want to applaud you on the charts because we requested those literally on Monday, and you have them before you, so you can see it as we are listening to representatives from DCF. So before we move forward, are there any specific questions? Clarification, Representative Ballard.
Thank you. I'm just checking it, especially since you highlighted, thank you, Madam Chair, since you highlighted the date that we're looking at. So if we're looking at this first one, which is February the 8th, 2024, that would have come from the previous administration. All right, and then you said there was one October.
Yes, Chair. In the DCF packet of information, we did request them to provide the committee with all of the subsequent letters that they have received from USDA. This is one that was provided to me, the February one was provided to me by a legislator, and then the other subsequent letters are in the packet that DCF has since received, that I just didn't have copies of that DCF provided, all related to the same timeline.
Do you know if this is a standard that's sent to states in general when they're out of compliance, or the fact that you said there was a letter for a legislator before? Was this something initiated from the state that received, or is it something they send out usually to states that may not be in compliance?
Understood, Chair. I can't speak to this specific letter. I can speak to, there's one in the DCF packet, I want to say it's the one from October. That is a letter that includes all state ranks and showing states that are in compliance or are not, that went to all states.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation on the graph charts document. I think you explained this, but I'm still a little confused about the Program Access Index. So is that comparing the number of SNAP beneficiaries to the total estimated low-income population of the state, or how's that index determined?
Yes, Chair. So my understanding is that it compares a state's average monthly SNAP participation rate to the number of people living in a state below the 125% of the federal poverty line. My understanding is that it's a measure of access. So states with a higher index are reaching more individuals who are below that poverty line. States with a lower index are reaching less of that population.
So if I might? Okay, so thank you. Then if I'm understanding, for instance, in 2000, we'll take 23, the latest date available. Kansas, under this index, is reaching 44%.
Chair, I would be hesitant to go that way. Mathematically, an index does not translate directly to percentage in this particular case. So it's more useful to compare to other states in this particular index. If you're higher or lower, it's not meant to be seen as a percentage and to say 44% in that regard.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to follow up on that question real quick, if that's okay, Representative Francis, and then I'll pass it to you. So on that line of questioning, if we look at those other states, do they have the same guidelines that they must work 20 hours in order to be recipients? Do they have any other types of waivers that might increase the number of SNAP benefit receivers? Do you know if it's apples to apples?
Correct. I do understand your question, and you are right that it's apples to apples in that this is an index that was created to allow us to see how well a state is reaching that particular population. It does take into account the fact that there are different policies in each state, which is why some people, you could look at this graph and see that Kansas is lower because of some of the legislation that's been passed. One could look at it and say that because of, for example, the ABOD legislation, the going to work legislation, less individuals are needing SNAP because they are working, is the theory that can be drawn. So that's why it depends on how you're viewing SNAP and what you think of this index, whether you would want to see a state lower or higher.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a positive or a negative if you are high or you are low. I think ultimately we would all like to see people that are free of any subsistence, that they're able to provide for themselves and their families. So it's not necessarily a positive or negative being high or low. Correct. Okay. And then also, I don't know if you have any information that would correlate these numbers, the PAI number, with the amount. I'm assuming that in these other states, they're expending more. Their expenses are higher than ours for this benefit. Would that be fair to say, or not necessarily?
That's definitely something I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to, Chair. I understand your line of questioning. I'm happy to do more research on that, but I couldn't speak to that one way or the other.
Okay, well, we'll hold off, and there may be other experts in the group. And so Representative Sawyer, if you're responding to that, if not, I'm going to put you in the queue after Representative Francis. Okay, we'll go with Francis and then Sawyer.
You can go ahead. You asked my question.
Oh, I did. Okay. All right, Representative Sawyer.
All right, thank you. All right. I was listening to your answers to the chair. Do they, I guess it's not clear to me. So the fact that, for example, Kansas requires 20 hours of work, are our numbers adjusted for that or not? I thought you said they were, but then.
They are not adjusted for it, Chair, in the traditional sense if we're looking at a study and we say, oh, it's been adjusted for age, or I wouldn't think of it that way. But these are very detailed questions, and I'm feeling a little nervous being here answering those questions. I can definitely give you some more information about that particular one if they don't answer it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I would say let's circle back to all these questions when DCF comes up and gives their testimony, and I think they may be able to shine light. And if not, if this is something you would like us to look at further, then please write those questions down. You can submit those at the end, and we'll take those for further review. Representative Sutton and then Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just got lost a little bit when we were on the math behind the calculation of this index. It's not a percentage. What is it? What goes into the calculation of this index, and what does it actually tell me?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Thank you, Representative. An index is difficult for me to describe, and I apologize, I cannot do it better. All I can tell you is that this is the indicator established by USDA, and this is what Kansas is reflecting, and this is what the other states are reflecting. Hopefully, DCF can shed some more light to help explain it, and if not, I can follow up with you after the meeting.
Excellent. I'd love to see them show their work on this one so I can see what exactly they're calculating. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I bet the feds have a really wonderful little show your work kind of page that it's probably 500 pages, but anyway. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're just kind of stuck on this first graph, I think, so that's what my question is about too. I know you didn't make up the title, the Program Access Index, but what I'm kind of stuck on is just the word access. Like that makes it sound like it's harder to get access because maybe the application is more detailed or something. Is it, I mean, I don't know if when you were doing this, if you found out any information, or is it kind of like the program usage index, like how many people use it, or is it really about access?
Chair, again, these are questions in the weed. I can just reiterate that it's comparing the state's average SNAP participation rate to the number of people living in a state who are below 125% of the federal poverty line.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Thanks. That was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that ultimately we'll want to get to the bottom of, and I think we'll be able to get that perhaps today, what the eligibility differences might be in these different states compared to what are the minimum requirements from the feds in relationship to this. So that's probably what we're going to want to see and ascertain why Kansas is low. Is that good? And what does that exactly mean? Any other questions? Representative Francis.
And Amanda, have you seen a documentation that describes the methodology that's used to compute that ratio?
Chair, yes, sir, it's available. I just can't speak to it in this moment, sorry.
And you could probably get it to the committee, because I do think the interpretation of those numbers will be important to us.
Absolutely.
All right. Yes, Representative Avercamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll probably ask the same question with DCF, so if you want to put on this one. But the payment error rate, how do they find that? So is it a post, is just an audit every year, or how do they get those numbers?
Yes, Chair, I will definitely punt that one to the agency. They're very well prepared to talk about that.
I think that is going to be in the testimony. I think I saw that earlier today. So if there are no other questions, thank you so much. I think there's a lot to review here. All right, committee, moving on to the next item of business, and you might keep this chart handy for reference, or any of the other materials for reference. You will now want to pull out your packet that has the paper clip and it has the slides on it. And that's what we're going to be working from at this point. And we have, Secretary Howard was not able to be with us today. So we have Deputy Director Tanya Keys here today. Is that right? Tanya, welcome. Come on up. Now, Tanya, are you going to be going through this entire packet here today? Or are you handing it off to others?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Williams. I will be going through the packet and will reference other parts of the packet, but I'll primarily be going through the PowerPoint that looks like this, has a larger title.
Okay, and before you proceed, we also have General Counsel Mark Altenbert here. And Mark, there you go. And Program Director Dr. Carla Whiteside Hicks. All right, and she is here as well. And are either of you formally presenting or just here for questions?
They're here to assist me with questions.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for an opportunity for DCF to provide an overview of SNAP program, food assistance. I'm Tanya Keys, and I'm pleased to be here today. I'm going to go through a little bit of eligibility, a little bit of transaction monitoring, the federal review, which we'll get into some of those performance measures and information. Some of it might be duplicate, so as I go through this PowerPoint, I may skip some pages to be most efficient, but happy to answer any questions as we go and get into more detail. In addition to this, your packet has more detailed documents on a summary. You also have a food assistance application. You have a set of our corrective action plan letters, as was referenced earlier, and there's a comparison document. So there are some supporting documents to today's overall summary. So as you're aware and you're learning, if you haven't already had an opportunity to learn a little bit about food assistance, the program is through USDA, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It really gives low-income households access to food benefits, and broadly, eligibility might be those households with persons who are elderly, persons who have low income, working families, other low income housings, and it is eligible for food items and seeds. So that's just a general overview of how that goes through. just continuing with a little bit of general information about their program, if you're not aware, the monthly benefits are provided on a Kansas benefits card. The card can be used at enrolled retailers or grocers and enrolled farmers markets, and it really can only be used at those locations. The card cannot be cashed out or used for non-food items. So that's a little bit of information on that. Wanted to get a little bit of general information on eligibility with regard to monthly income. This chart shows you, for example, if it's a household size of 2, the maximum benefit for an eligible household would be $536, and that gross income maximum would be just a little over $2,200, just to give you a sense of some of that program income eligibility. Very briefly, you received some detailed information in your packets about the eligibility factors. And again, it's those who work but might have a low income. For example, persons age 60 or older, or a person with a disability may be eligible. And there is mention of able-bodied individuals ages 18 to 44 without children who work or attend those training programs 20 hours per week. In terms of accessing food assistance, the application, we have a number of different pathways that folks might apply. And again, you have an application as part of your packet that could be online, could be face-to-face at one of our service centers, could be dropped off, or there are some helping agencies we work with on that. And you have been provided a list of the verifications that we do with regard to identities of persons and resources. The next few slides go through the different types of eligibility, and I think that was covered in some of the other information. So for now, I'll run through those, and we can help with questions on that at the end, if you have questions with regard to specific populations or attributes of it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, what might be or who might be a Kansan receiving this. So let me go back one. So what we know about Kansans who are receiving SNAP benefits: average age 38, average household just over 2 persons. Monthly benefit average $189 a person, or $392 per case. And over half have a high school or some type of GED, high set education, and over half, about 60%, almost 2/3, have some type of earned income for their household. As of June of last year, in 2024, so almost a year ago, over 97,000 households were receiving SNAP. One of those households, a little bit of detail about them. So, not quite a third, 1 adult with children, 2-parent households, 11%, et cetera. So that's a little bit about who in Kansas is receiving. More of a little bit of a snapshot regarding the length of time for receiving SNAP benefits. About 2/3 are receiving that benefit for 1 year or less. Just over 1/3 receiving the benefit for 6 months or less. So that gives you a sense of the duration of the benefit. Wanted to talk a little bit, now that you know a little bit about the program summary, talk a little bit about some of the transaction monitoring and fraud investigations that we might have with regard to the benefit. As I mentioned, these benefits occur or are transacted through the Kansas benefit card. Looks a lot like a debit card physically when you look at it. Again, can only be able to use it at enrolled stores, enrolled farmers markets, and it can only be able to purchase food items or seeds. Let's talk a little bit about some internal ways that we can monitor transactions. Within our Economic and Employment Services teams at DCF, we have a team that's dedicated to continuously monitoring transactions. So what that could look at is they're looking for unusual activity. And through our the vendor that we have for the benefits card, the EBT card. They provide us a file and information so we can look at that more than once in a day to look for any unusual transactions. You know, for example, maybe an unusual out-of-state transaction or a transaction from a different phone number that doesn't make sense. So we have ways that we're doing that internally, and then we get those files regarding retailer activity that can help us identify when something looks like it doesn't make sense. Additional verifications we have a fraud group that uses different software and technologies such as Clear and Tox that can pull information where it might flag some type of transaction to help us. But we do receive a lot of fraud worries brought to our attention by a fraud hotline. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and give that information. In terms of us having a dedicated fraud investigation unit, they're really investigating, detecting, and preventing any fraud for benefits our agency has across our benefits, which would include SNAP as one of those programs that they have within their realm. We have a dedicated team. We have a chief investigator. We have 14 special investigators that are looking at fraud, so we do have a dedicated team assigned to that. When fraud is detected, again, they might come from a hotline or they might come from something that internally our economic and employment supports staff have identified as something unusual. So those are the two ways that it happens. Those referrals then, after they're assessed, they're tracked in a database, they're provided to a special investigator, and depending on the nature of what the worry is, they might use different case techniques in order to dive into that fraud worry. How it's investigated, so we become aware of the worry that fraud may have been committed. It's staffed with a fraud analyst. And then depending on the nature of what's found, ultimately, depending on the dollar amount and the other activity, it might go for further review. And then we do use, the USDA provides that, or prefers when fraud is known, they prefer to do a waiver or to find a way to have a conversation with that individual so that they can consent or don't contest that fraud happened, and so that can be settled in a way where there's a waiver. But sometimes if they won't voluntarily sign a federal waiver, it might need to go to an administrative law judge. But those are the two most frequent pathways. A little bit about just some results and figures in this. For fiscal year 25 so far, for example, of the ones we've received, 121 instances where fraud was found did end up having the waiver where the person signed the waiver and was able to resolve the fraud that way. And there have been 6 that needed to be in order through the Office of Administrative Hearings. The next larger topic is the federal review and our corrective action plans. So we can go through those. In our federal reviews, so the federal government has a continuous review process for SNAP and other programs. They're part of the overall quality assurance process and are always happening. The reviews are actually conducted by the Food and Nutrition Services. So you might hear the abbreviation FNS sometimes when we talk about our corrective action plans. There's 2 ways that these happen, and you already got a preview to a couple of these ways. So the accuracy is measured in 2 ways. The PER, the payment error rate, which you saw on the previous graphs, and it assesses the accuracy of eligibility when benefits are determined. So someone is receiving the SNAP benefit. That's what the payment error rate looks like. The other one is the case and procedure error rate, the CAPER, which was also on that document that had the nice graphs. And that's when if a household is denied SNAP benefits, it looks at, did they receive information timely regarding that denial or suspension or whatever the context was. that they didn't receive the benefit. So those are the two pieces that measure accuracy and timeliness. I wanted to talk next about, in terms of a federal review, what the agency does in terms of our steps internally. So we have a quality control group, and there's a sample that's taken. So we select a number of household files to review each month, and then USDA comes in, and with that sample, they come in and do a secondary review on that same sample. So they're looking at what we found, and then they go back in and verify and look to make sure. So there's a secondary review. We have about 1,800 case files reviewed each month, and then those are sent to Food and Nutrition Services for that federal review. And the FNS is the Food and Nutrition Services that I mentioned. So those FNS reviewers then, they're re-reviewing that sample that we read. So that's the continuous improvement of the case review we have. We read some, and they read a sample of that. That's sort of the framework of it. This review process includes a detailed interview with the household and verification of circumstances, verification of the documents, of the SNAP eligibility, and the benefit. We'll get now into a little bit more detail into that payment error rate and the case and procedure error rate. So each June, FNS analyzes final data for that federal fiscal year, and that's where they determine some of these national rates, and those national rates you would have seen on those charts a few moments ago. So that's their cycle, is they're looking at June. So FNS considers the rates, for the payment error rate and the CAPER rate acceptable if neither rate exceeds the national rate, and then some of them have a more specific. So as you saw earlier, states that have a high payment error rate, and if that continues for more than 2 consecutive years, they get charged a penalty. There's also opportunity for corrective action plans, and that's what we want to talk a little bit about today, and you have some letters to accompany the corrective action plan. This chart that we have here kind of gives a snapshot of what's happening with the 3 pieces of corrective action plan that Kansas is involved in. So on the far left, you have some kind of milestones, for example, dates that we submitted a letter, dates that a corrective action plan might have been approved, and we'll go across from left to right. So the application processing timeliness. This is a piece where we would hope that when we're processing applications, we want to get those done in 30 days. And the performance standard that we're really trying to achieve is 95% timeliness. That's where we want to be. Historically, we have not been there at 95%, and we've been working hard to get that accomplished. We've been in corrective action plan, and our April 2025 data would show most recently that we're at 96%. And we've got some information in our detailed packet that gives a historical perspective, but we are excited in April of this year to be at 96%. The next one is the case and procedure error, the CAPER. This is the one where a state wants to be at or below the national rate in terms of when we're looking at that. So the national most recent number was the 44.52, and most recently Kansas was at 49.06. So we are in a corrective action plan to lower ours. We want to be at or below national. So we're 4 points away with the most recent information to be at that national rate. And that piece, again, just as a reminder, that CAPER is adhering to the timeliness of, when a household is denied a benefit. That's really what it's looking at. Were we timely with notice of denial? Then, so what's on the far right there then is the payment error, and that's for those who are receiving the benefit. How did we do for that? We want to be at 6% or less. And in federal fiscal year 25, which is more recent data than the charts that you all have from some of those federal resources available, we were just over 11%. So we have work to do to reduce that. Again, we'd like to be at 6% or less on the payment error rate. We submit semi-annual updates for our corrective action plans, for our timeliness processing, where we want to be at that 95% threshold to get things done in 30 days. We're having calls, for example, every 6 to 8 weeks. We receive a lot of technical assistance and a lot of really good collaboration with our federal partners. And FNS is really helpful to us, and just, for example, they can help us with policy clarification, updated training. They have some tools and some good conversation with us so that we can learn a little bit more for the application processing timely. I forgot to mention that even though we're talking to them every 6 or 8 weeks, we do provide them data each month. So FNS is looking at our data every month, and we're talking to them every 6 to 8 weeks. We've been really proud about the incremental progress that we've been able to make. One of the pieces that's really made a difference for Kansas lately is in the past year, we've been working on a model that we call One Kansas. And what it is it's a method or approach of processing applications that come in, and they might come in from anywhere in the state, any city. You have, someone living in Pittsburgh, someone living in Liberal. That process application is submitted, and we've started a One Kansas approach where we consider it a statewide caseload. So as it comes in with the needs that it has, if it needs to be expedited or perhaps it's non-expedited, regular, any of our team members working in EES can start processing that no matter where their base is in the office. So if you live in Kansas City, you don't have to wait for someone in the Kansas City office to be available to help you. Any of our employees across the state can work it as a statewide caseload, and they take that application from a queue and they start working on it. And it's helping us be more swift statewide with all of our process applications. The other thing that we're really looking forward to is some software that could help us. The software is called Current, but the software can help the system, our key system, identify the right queues, and it can help us process more timely based on the needs of the household. And we're happy to answer questions, and I do believe, depending on your question, I might be asking for some help with some of the answers. Thank you for the opportunity to give you some quick overview.
All right, thank you, Director Keys. Okay, before we open it up for questions, let's get organized with all this information. First, committee, I'd ask you to take out the chart that Amanda provided for us, and we're going to ask you to fill in some blanks first, so we're all on the same page. And do you have that chart from Amanda? Yes, it looks like this. If you don't have one, we're going to provide you one.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
I believe I
excellent.
do. Thank you.
On this chart, you actually gave the answers, I think, to all of them, but let's just go through it. First of all, let's make sure we have the goals for each of these. For the PAI, is there a particular index number that the federal government is looking for, or not necessarily?
I'll look to Carl. I think I know the answer to this. I don't know that. Thank you for the question. I don't know that there's a particular number that we would be looking for. I think how this number helps is over time for a state, and perhaps comparing to some neighboring states. Are we making sure that we're doing enough reach for the program so that those who are eligible, this number reflects those that might be just eligible just based on one component of an income. But over time, how does this help the state understand whether or not we're reaching all those who might be eligible?
Okay, and so what we're trying to do is just get this chart complete here before we answer or ask questions. So the next question is going to the payment error rate. The goal was 6% or less, correct? Okay, and the next page, the APTR, the goal is 95% accuracy, or is that correct?
Thank you for the question, yes.
Okay, and then the CAPER, is that how you say it? Or-
That is how I say
Okay,
it.
all right. What would be the goal? What's that percent that we should be hitting at?
Sure. So the goal for any state is to be at or below the national.
Okay, so that obviously is changing, and it looks like nationally we're getting worse. Am I reading that correctly? From 28.6% to 44.5? Yeah, CAPER.
Thank you for
Am
the
I
question.
interpreting that
Yes.
correctly, that that's not good to have a higher percentage? Or am I reading that wrong?
Well,
It says national rate in 2017 is 28.6, and now the national rate is 44.5. It's the procedure and error rate, so the higher that would be, the kind of, for not doing as good a job, correct?
correct. And this, thank you. And this measure is for those who are denied a benefit or suspended a benefit. So it looks at a population of those who ultimately do not receive the benefit. Were they notified timely?
Okay, so the goal is under the national number.
My understanding is at or under.
At or
Yes.
under. Okay, so let's go back to the front page if you don't mind. I hope you have these numbers. Again, trying to establish the trends of where we are now and making sure we can fill in the missing pieces. Online, we cannot find this information. So you referenced how we're doing today. And so can we look at 24 and 25 for the PAI rate and tell us where Kansas is for 2024 and where you are expecting to be in 2025, or do you have that?
I don't have that information with me. And as I understand it, the program access index isn't something that we regularly look at, but we will attempt to get that for 24 and 25.
So FNS, they don't provide it's not online, but they have not provided it to you either for 2024?
Thank you for the question. No, they have not. I think there are a number of reports that we don't have past federal fiscal year 2023.
Well, let's go to the next one, the PER rate. So do you have your rate from last year? So we were 9 and then 12, so we exceeded the national average in error. So how did we do last year?
Let me see.
What was your submission?
Thank you for the question. I am looking at our detailed document that at the top says federal review.
Okay.
And the PER is on page 4 of 4. And so federal fiscal year 24, it was 10.11. In federal fiscal year 25, 11.6.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, you have that in this
And do you
document.
have the national rate for 24?
I do not have that with me. I don't know if that's available, but if it is, we can get it for the committee.
Okay, great. And then Amanda, if we do proceed beyond today, if we could fill in these, but just for today, we're going to fill them in ourselves. Okay, let's turn the page and look on the back side. The APTR, what was Kansas 24 and reported 25 if you reported it?
That is the measure that we provide monthly data files, and we have conversations every 6 to 8 weeks. So we have information by month. We don't have it for a full federal fiscal year. I can give, and it is on page 3 of 4 in the document that is titled Federal Reviews in the packet. So for example, if we look at October of 2024, it was 93.5%. And as recently as April 2025, we are at 96.55% on the application timeliness.
We have a lot of peepers here, so I'm
Yeah.
not, I don't want to distract from what we're doing, try to find that exact, okay, that one. Okay, let me look for that one real quick. I think we have several of these, don't we? Backside.
This is one that we've made quite a bit of improvement with.
Okay, so we're going up. So we're definitely in the 90s.
Yes, and we
Overall.
meet the federal goal of 95% or more.
Okay, so over 90% average at least. And then finally for the last one, what was that Kansas rate? Percentage.
I'm sorry, thank you for the timeliness.
Yeah, the case and procedural error rate.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. That is on page 4 of 4, and in federal fiscal year 25, we're at 23.13.
Did you say 32.75?
That would have been, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. I apologize. For federal fiscal year 24, 32.75%. I had read you the fiscal year 25.
32.75, and then a projection for where we are in 25 is 23%.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for having it all, or helping me get that information onto our working chart. And so we're going to go ahead and open up with questions, and I'll start with Carpenter. Representative Carpenter, if you have a question, just flag Representative Lewis or myself, and we'll write you down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for all this information. So it looks like on the back of this sheet that we're kind of improving a lot on this stuff before I saw that. But I had a question. It seems like these started in 2022. So did we change contractors? How do we do eligibility for SNAP? We have a contractor. We don't hire employees to do all this. So we have a contractor that does the eligibility for us.
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you. Eligibility determination is done by an employee of the Department for Children and Families. They're organized within a team in our Economic and Employment Services Department. So they are DCF employees.
So we don't contract that out like we do eligibility for our Medicaid program or anything like that?
Correct. They are
Okay.
completed by a state employee,
So
a
how
DCF
many
employee.
employees do we have?
I'm sorry?
How many employees do we have in that department that are doing this eligibility?
I'm going to lean on thank you for the question, about 200 statewide.
So we have 200 people that process these applications. Okay.
Yes, thank you. 200 persons who would be processing applications for SNAP benefits.
And how are those folks paid for? It's a maintenance effort.
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you for the question. On the administrative cost that we have for preparing those benefits, those are a mix of state general funds and federal funds. I have that budget information if you wish for it, but it's a combination. The source of paying for the administrative cost of that is SGF and federal funds.
Correct. So we get federal funds as a maintenance of effort for providing this program. Is that accurate?
We do get federal funds and there is a maintenance of effort for this program, yes. Thank you for the question.
Very good. Just one final one on this graph over here on page 11. So it's fiscal year 22, 23, 24, and 25. And I'm seeing at the bottom, it's 121 to 6. So what fiscal year, how is that fiscal year? Is that a fiscal year like the state fiscal year, or is it an annual fiscal year?
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you for the question. I'm not sure which document you're
Yeah,
referencing.
it's on your slides. It's page 11 on your slides at the top of the page. And you've got 2022, 136, 164, 226, and 2024, 121, and 25. And I was just curious about what fiscal year that was. If it's the one that we have ending in this June,
Yeah.
or if it's a year to year.
Thank you for the question. I apologize. I'm not able to find the page. That doesn't match my page 11. Slide 21. I'm
Slide
so sorry.
29?
Thank you.
21, okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. That is state fiscal year.
Okay, so that would be ending in a couple of months, 2025.
Correct. Yes, thank you. It is not a full year for state fiscal year 25 yet.
Right, but it's almost done. Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
almost
Madam Chair.
up, but yeah, you're welcome. But it's almost up, but it is noticeably less. I'm wondering how much has not been included in that number yet. I don't know. So I guess we'll find out very soon. Representative Sutton and then Representative Avercamp and Ballard.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I may have a few. If you want to interrupt me at some point, feel free. But I've kind of been taking notes as we went along. Following up on that initial one, on the last question, we see the number of results in waivers and convictions or denials of qualification. How many does that represent initially, initial claims that were then processed?
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you. I have fiscal year 24 data, so we can use that line.
I'm good with that.
And we do have this information in the deeper summary document that was provided in your packet. But in state fiscal year 24, 625 cases were received for investigation, and that was about 50% of those that were received through a hotline.
Okay, 600, I'm sorry.
625
were received through a hotline?
were received for investigation, and about 50, which is about 50% of all the hotline cases. So let me find the document that has the total number. Or if our general counsel knows that, on the top of his head. It'll take me a minute to find it, but we have it in our general summary.
All right. Circle back to me when you get the opportunity. I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I will.
You also mentioned corrective action plans or CAPs. How many CAPs is DCF under from the federal government? You mentioned these three. Are there more? You said plural, so I want to find out that.
And, Madam Chair, Representative, thank you. For this program, 3.
Yes, and for this program and in general.
We can get you that information. We have corrective action plans for other programs, for example, through child welfare or other programs that are outside of economic and employment supports. So to clarify so we can get the correct answer to you, would you like all program improvement and corrective action plans for the entire agency?
I would, yes. That would be very helpful. Thank
Thank you. We can get that information.
And Representative Sutton, did you have more questions?
Oh, a whole bunch.
Okay, hold on one sec. We'll definitely come back to you. But on the corrective action plans, would we assume that anyone or any state that failed to meet the goal, the criteria set by FNS, would get a corrective action plan? And would they get a corrective action plan for each of these in which they were in violation, whether it's PER or APTR?
Thank you for the question. I'll need to ask for help on that. I don't know the national, and I'll see. Yes, Dr. Whiteside Hicks says yes.
So yes, any item in which we did not meet the standard, we would receive a corrective action plan. And the answer is yes. And so if we were to follow up on the question from Representative Sutton, what would be the number of correction action plans and for which one and for what year might be helpful for us to see if we're trending less corrective action plans or more corrective action plans. And then on that note, on your slide 26, it said that if you have 2 consecutive years, then you'd be charged a penalty. Now, on the numbers that I'm seeing here, I don't think we have 2 consecutive years in one area, but I may have missed something. Have we been charged a penalty?
Kansas has not.
Okay. All right, good to know. Representative Sutton, I'll keep your name on the list. We will come back. We have Representative Arekamp, Ballard, and then Osmond online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Go back to the payment error rate. And so we're looking at, on page 4 of your Federal Reviews handout, again at 11.6% and 25, 10.11%. So I know government's different in business, but typically a payment error is pretty critical. And most businesses, as far as accounts payable, your error rate, you kind of want it to be around 0. And this is over, I think it's $400+ million program, looking at 11% error rate. Can you kind of dive into what are these errors? How do they find them? What are your, let's say, top 3 reasons for having errors?
Yeah, I'll have Dr. Whiteside-Hicks address our most frequent errors.
All right, well, let's do that. And then also if we could kind of crunch some numbers and how much this 11.6 is based on your Chair Arekamp, we're talking about 40+ million. Okay, so even if we brought it down to 6%, how much would we be saving every year if we did that? And thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Carla Whiteside-Hicks, Director of Economic and Employment Services for DCF. So the payment error rate can be from numerous sources. So one of the things that we do, let me share first, is that when we have a corrective action plan, as we are drafting that plan, we have to identify the root cause for the error. So it's not just improve your payment error rate, it's what specifically is causing it. One of the things is income not being calculated correctly in our eligibility determination system, and it's an error. So I get pay stubs from a client, and I enter those pay stubs as biweekly instead of semi-monthly. That's a different calculation. And so KEYS is the eligibility determination system is going to calculate the countable income for that family incorrectly because I input the information incorrectly. So that's one. Another is rent. So on the application, the client says, yes, I pay rent, but there's no rent that is entered into the system for that household because I missed it somehow. And then unearned income, self-employment is huge. We make a lot of mistakes in that area. So those are the 3 that are most common.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's just, so how, I guess I'm kind of having a little bit of confusion over just as they enter this data, this is an application form where I'm asking questions and entering data. We're making errors on some of the very most basic elements of the application, such as income, rent, self-employment. How would you approach correcting these errors? I mean, we're talking quite a bit of, from my perspective, it's a high percentage.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may. So what we will do is, first of all, we identify what's the source of those errors. Is it an entire DCF region? Is it one office? Is it one team in an office? So we identify where are those errors coming from. And so we will require additional training. We review our training materials. Maybe the training materials are not clear, and so eligibility workers are not fully understanding how they are to perform these tasks. So we look at things like that. If it is an individual or an office, we will do additional case reviews for those eligibility workers who seem to be struggling in that area. So again, we go back to the root cause and try to address it that way.
Last one, do you have any, when you look at, let's say the rest of fiscal, let's say 2026, fiscal 26, what would be a goal that you're shooting for on your payment error rate?
I would like to see us no more than about 3%.
I'm sorry, three?
Three.
Excellent. That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we're going to move down the line of those that have questions, but real quick on the following up on that. So in order to find that error rate, we submit all of those cases to FNS. They review those 1,800 or that percentage that is the sample. And then from our actual paperwork or our actual data, they are looking at our data and saying, oops, this is the amount of error. Is that correct?
So, Madam Chair, we review first, and we do that several ways. First, every region has a team of case reviewers. So those individuals are reviewing cases. So hopefully we can identify where you keep making errors before one of your cases gets pulled for a federal review. Then we have a team, part of our program integrity team. They do annual reviews in every region. And so they are reviewing the cases in every region. Again, this is not part of the federal review. This is just us internally trying to get ahead of where we may have areas where we have significant errors. For the actual federal review, yes, we have reviewed those cases, and there's a random sample, so there's an algorithm that is applied to that. We review those cases internally, and then, yes, FNS reviews them secondarily.
Okay, and then before I pass the torch real quick, since some of us are more familiar with the overall costs of the program than others on this committee, I will add that additional request, which is for this particular program, the food nutrition supplement program, this, the SNAP benefit. Could you provide, based on this handout you provided, could you provide the amount, the expenditures on page 4? We could just do it, total expenditures for SNAP, and then how much would be associated for fiscal year 22 for, let's say, the payment error rate, and then each year. Could
Madam
you
Chair, yes, we can provide that
information for us? Yes, we're going to Representative Humphreys is going to slip in before Representative.
Because I just want to make sure that the payment error rate is only payments, it's errors of payments you made to people, or is it errors of payments you didn't make to people?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, it's both.
Yeah, and so therefore we can't just say 11% of the total amount because it was give and take, right?
Well, I think you can say that total error rate, because I think they take the two, the overpayment and the underpayment, and then it's the summation of those that gives you the total error rate. So I think it's still an accurate, that one number.
So, Madam Chair, we can give you both. We can tell you the dollar amount for the overpayments and the dollar amount for the underpayments.
Okay, and I think, is that on something that DCF provided, or is it something that Amanda provided? Or actually, it may have been something that was provided to Chair Awerkamp's committee last year. I know I've seen that breakdown. Amanda?
I was just going to add that that overpayment and underpayment thing is available on USDA's website. It just wasn't captured here. If that's helpful when we revise these tables, we can split that out.
Yes, and also just the total too. I will say the overpayment is small. I did see that. It's very small amount. It's mostly, I'm sorry, it's the underpayment that's small.
Yeah.
The overpayment is the big portion.
Thank you for letting me jump in. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we're just trying to get a handle of it. So thank you for giving us the latitude to ask all these questions. And now Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, that part of the question was part of my question. if we could get them separate, because I think when you say we combine them, you don't get a true picture of where the error really was. So it would be very difficult in order to correct, okay? But I want to go back to that as well. In many ways, it says there are currently 36 states, which means 68% of the United States have had, I'll just read it. There are currently 36 states out of 50 states, the District of Columbia and 2 territories listed on an application process and timeliness. Okay, so whatever errors are being made, 68% of the states are making them. They may be very different in the process. So if Kansas fits in this category, which we haven't identified they do, they have a lot of company. So part of it, who decides the timeliness corrective plan? Would it be the federal government that has made a list of all of these statements and a combination of the individual states to correct them?
So, Madam Chair, the application timeliness rate for the state of Kansas is calculated from data directly from our eligibility determination system. So the eligibility determination system, KEYS, captures the date of application. We are then required to make a benefit and eligibility determination within 30 days. So when we run a report in KEYS, we can easily see which applications fell outside of that 30-day window. And that's the data that we send to FNS.
Okay. May I follow?
Yeah.
Do they, when they're calculating the 68% that are making all of these errors, do you get a list of what all those common errors are that people have, or would you get it if Kansas was on it specifically, what are we guilty of?
Madam Chair, yes, it is specific to Kansas. So unless I reach out to one of my counterparts in another state, I do not know the root cause of their untimeliness.
I think the part that struck me is what a large number we have that are committing these errors in the state. So if we are, we correct ours, but that means we are not doing something out of the ordinary because we have so many that fit in that category. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and then before we go to Representative Osmond, I'm going to follow up on where I found this to Representative Humphreys. Actually, it was on the USDA's website, and I think we could probably get Amanda to create a little chart with the links of where we can get information. But this is a list of states, and it is payment error rates, and it has Kansas at overpayments at 8.74%. Their underpayments are 0.33. By the way, this is year 2022, so that's a really big difference. So then that payment error rate, combining those two, is the 9.07. So I think when we look at it, and I'm looking at just generally all of those states, the underpayment seems to be consistently the minor of the two in that regard. But if we had access to that link, I could probably go locate it again, but I'm not sure exactly where it is. Okay, so moving on to Representative Osmond.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I apologize that I just checked my camera is not working, but I wanted to thank you for addressing me. Let me ask a couple of questions relating to fraud. I'd like to try to get a comprehensive understanding of it. So let's start with the payment error rate. Is that considered fraud, or what is an official definition of fraud as it relates to SNAP benefits?
Madam Chair, no, the payment error rate is not necessarily fraud. Fraud is an intentional act to violate federal or state law. The payment error rate can be an error that an eligibility worker made in maybe transposing numbers when adding information into keys, but it is something that is unintentional. It is not fraud.
Okay, thank you very much. So in the presentation that was made, they go through quality control review. There was 1,800 cases reviewed monthly, interviews, corrective action plans, a number of different things. I don't know how much of that is to quote, root out fraud, but I'm just trying to understand what is the cumulative cost for the investigation that's under here?
Madam Chair, so the cumulative cost for fraud investigation or for the program integrity piece?
We can delve into both of those. Yes, fraud as a component, but the integrity piece as well as an entirely is an entire portion of what investigative budget is.
Okay, Madam Chair, we can get that information. So I'm assuming you mean, so for FTEs, staff time?
Yes.
Okay, yes, we could provide that information.
Fantastic. And the secondary point that I'd like to find out as well is what is the total benefit from the investigation, both the integrity piece as well as a fraud investigation, as in how much is being spent, how much is being recovered?
Madam Chair, we can provide that information also.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, and again, I'm going to interject on that because I have a document here, and again, apologies to committee. Sometimes it's, I'm kind of flipping between what I looked at prior and what we were given here. And so I'm not sure if you have this, but this is the fraud presentation. And did that go to your committee, Chair Camp, the fraud presentation?
Madam Chair, we did spend quite a bit of time looking at the fraud. I think, so yes, part of that did, for sure.
Okay, all right, so Amanda, was this one provided to the committee? Okay. Okay, so it wasn't provided, but maybe let's make a note because I think this would help answer some questions and then actually provide it also to DCF so they could update it because it looks like it only goes to 2022. So you might be able to add a couple years onto that at least. But to answer the questions that were just asked on this document, it will have each area. And so, for example, we're looking at food assistance, and it'll say the agency error, the number of cases, the client error, the number of cases, and the fraud, and the number of cases. They don't have the total amount owed for each. And so I'm just looking, let's go to 2020, because I think this is pretty relevant for our discussion here. All right, 2022. You just heard me mention those numbers. They skyrocketed to 300 cases in 2022. So this is post-COVID. The client had 242 errors and the agency had 122. So if we just focus on the fraud, that's amount owed, $1.3 million. The amount that's collected is just over $1 million. $1 million. Now, the interesting thing about that is it looks like the federal government says if you go back and you reclaim this, you're allowed to keep 20% of collections on client error and 35% of collections on fraud. So there is an incentive. We only have federal incentives for getting it right, correct?
Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. And what we do, when we have identified an overpayment, we enter that claim, if you will, into the eligibility system. So, and we give the client the choice. The client can write us a check for the amount that is due, or we will take 10% of the benefit moving forward to be able to satisfy that balance. And we also use tax intercept if necessary.
And again, apologies, are we having anyone from the fraud unit speak to us today? Okay, well, I'll hold off on that, but basically, I think bottom line is I think I want everybody else to ask their questions first, but bottom line, I would like to understand from the fraud unit how much in totality in our subsidies we are losing to fraud and what's a reasonable expectation to reduce that number because we all know that our budget could greatly use a little upswing on that, not an upswing on fraud. Okay, but we'll hold off. And we'll let other people ask questions, but just be thinking about response related to that. Representative Hoy, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yes, thank you, but Representative Humphreys asked the question that I was going to ask.
Vice Chair Lewis?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm tracking. So when we talk about the error rate, we're talking about errors as well as fraud. They're both included in that error rate that you're talking about.
Madam Chair, no, we're only talking about errors. Errors and fraud are separate.
Okay, so I am confused then. So the overpayment does not include fraud then?
Madam Chair, no, not necessarily.
Okay. Not necessarily. What does that mean?
No, so a fraud claim would be processed differently, and depending on the level of fraud and really the motivation behind it, or I guess the intentionality of it, those are cases that we would refer to our general counsel for investigation review. It can go through the court system for a judgment. The payment error rate is for, basically, it's for errors that are unintentional.
Right, okay. So really, when we look at overpayment, we have to look at both the overpayment because of errors and then also the overpayment because of fraud.
Madam Chair, yes, we would have to split those out to get an accurate picture.
Okay, thank you.
So really, those numbers are just a bit more dire because the fraud numbers are not calculated in, for example, Chair Awerkamp's original question. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, let me verify that.
Okay.
And I'll go back and we'll review our numbers because I'm not sure which ones you have. So I just want to make sure what we included in the numbers that we gave you.
Okay, and we'll let General Counsel speak to that in a little bit on fraud. Because when we're talking about fraud, we could also be talking about those EBT cards that are sold, transferred, passed along to others, and used inappropriately. And the only way that we identify these are mostly the hotline, and then there are some internal ways.
Madam Chair, so for that, for example, recently we had a major skimming event in the greater Kansas City area. Actually, our EBT team realized that there was an issue early that morning and was able to go in. We assigned several staff members to go in and deactivate every EBT card that had been used at the grocery store where we knew that there must have been a skimming device. So we typically notice those things before FIS does.
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry for that interruption. All right, we're going to go to, hold on, we're going to go to Representative Sawyer and then Representative Ballard.
All right, thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with the CAPER. You know, you gave us the top three reasons that for the payment error rate, but can you give us what the 49% kind of bothers me. It's a high number, but if it's mostly just they're getting the notice a few days late, that's not such a big deal.
So, Madam Chair, this can also be an eligibility worker not documenting correctly. So there's way back we had paper case files. Well, now those are electronic files, but I still have to document. So when I am conducting the interview to determine eligibility, there's an interview template that we have designed that must be completed. So I can't just go to the bottom page and say interview complete. That would be an error. So we have to provide that information so that the next person coming to look at this case has everything that they need to be able to determine whether or not eligibility was correctly determined.
What percentage are people that should have gotten benefits or should have continued to get benefits and were denied or terminated?
Madam Chair, I would have to look at that. I don't have that data.
But I would assume that would go in this category.
Correct.
Because to me, that's a lot more concerning if that's a fairly high number. You know, the minor stuff doesn't bother me so much. Okay, then one follow-up on the payment. We've had this discussion on the payment error rate, and you mentioned one of the main causes was the self-employment income. You know, some of this would be hard to get. I mean, you asked the question, estimated monthly income and then estimated monthly expenses. So that would, I mean, something like that's going to be wrong a lot, I would assume.
Madam Chair, if I may, there are two different ways that we would calculate self-employment. So if an individual has been self-employed for under 12 months, then we are taking self-attestation for that. If it's been more than 12 months, and this is where we tend to have some difficulty, we are looking for your previous year's tax statement. And so one of the things that we have done is to remind staff that there is a desk aide that we have that walks them through the specific line items on the 1040 that they need to be looking at to determine what income we need to budget.
Okay, but if you're using the specific forms, to me, that you should be able to get those right.
Correct.
But if you're using estimated numbers, I can see why that would be an issue. All right, thank you.
Okay, real quick, following up on this, sometimes it's easier to just jump right in on the follow-up and then passing that to the next representative. But, you know, we keep talking about software, and the legislature spends a lot, millions and millions on updates on online software and protections and so forth. And there was a note about I shouldn't even say this. We passed something just this year that relates to new software. So we're not using Experian anymore, or we are going to stop using Experian for our online application.
So, Madam Chair, those are two separate issues. The software, Deputy Keys mentioned it, is the Deputy Secretary Keys. It is for, it's a workload management system. So what it allows is, if I'm in my office in Topeka and I'm looking at all of the applications and the items that are out there that need to be processed, I know that we're good. We don't need to focus on address changes right now because we have food assistance applications that came in 3 weeks ago and they haven't been touched. So instead of today, I have to send an email to the field and it trickles down, and then eligibility workers know to stop claiming those address changes and start claiming those applications. With that software, I click a button. Eligibility workers are all automatically fed those food assistance applications. They do not have the option of continuing to claim those address changes.
Okay, so just real quick follow-up then. I'm just going to focus real quick on the application then. And so they can fill this out by hand, or they can go online, or are they required to go online?
Madam Chair, they can do either. And per federal regulations, a complete application is a name, address, and signature.
Wow.
For food assistance, yes.
Okay, so, but in order for us, because I have a whole list of everything that's needed for verification, there is a long process that before a recipient receives this within the 30 days, that they have to go through and verify. And if they only give that amount of information, that's got to be very challenging. And my last little comment is, when I fill out an application online, if I'm going to make a purchase for an airline ticket or something, it will not let me process it and make the payment if I've left little areas unanswered. Right, fields unanswered. It will redline me and it'll stop me. It sounds like the state of Kansas needs that type of software that redlines every single application until all of those items are filled in. And do we have something like that?
That would not be federally allowable because we are now then limiting access to this benefit. There's a trade-off. So if we receive an application that only has name, address, and signature, that means the interview is going to take longer. If you give me the information that I need on the application, then the interview is probably just going to tick along, and it will not take as much time for us to do that. So at the end of the day, we have to have that information to determine eligibility, so we can get it on the application or we can get it on during the interview.
Right. I guess then really I'm coming back to the point is if whether they fill it out on their own or whether they fill it out online, somebody is working through it to make sure all the information is correctly placed in place before the 30 days expires. And therefore, if there was a software that actually would not let it move forward, it would alert them. Is that not the case? I mean, if we buy something online, you cannot go forward if you don't fill out every single item that they require.
So you're asking, can they skip items on the online application?
No, so I'm trying to figure out why we have such a high error rate, and if there is a better way. Is there not just an automatic prompt that shows that these, I guess the error rate wouldn't be just a blank field, it would be an improper input to the field. All right, I'll stop with that question. Okay, moving on to Representative Ballard.
All right, thank you. We're actually on following the same lines. I was trying to find it here and I can't, but it sort of indicated that among errors or whatever, we may make an error in not making a person who is eligible, eligible. So it's an ineligible, and we do it. Okay, so that's listed as part of often that happens. I know that happens because in March, I had 5 different people call me about that they were ineligible, but they didn't get a clear answer as to why they were not eligible. So when we make that kind of error, how do we correct it? They have to come, do we ask them to provide more information? Is that why they were denied? How do we handle that? Because in that case, if a person is eligible and they're not getting money that they need. So maybe that's fraudulent on our side because they were eligible, but they didn't have it. But we focus on who is trying to take advantage of this situation. So I want to go back to that person who is eligible, that we do not recognize that. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, that would actually fall under the capper because we did not follow proper procedures. When we deny an application, the denial notice should say specifically why you were denied. You did not provide verification of income from Walmart. You did not provide verification of rent. We should tell you specifically. And it shouldn't be the first time that you knew that we needed that information because we should have sent you a notice that said in writing, for this person in the household, we need verification of this. For this person, we need this. And then if we don't get it back in the 10-day window that we give you, then we send you a denial letter that says you are denied because you did not give us the information that we requested. So that would be an error for us. And what happens is when I get those emails or those phone calls, I either look the case up myself or I send that case out to the appropriate field office for someone in eligibility to review the case file to see if we processed it correctly or if we need to reach out to the client to make sure that we do get those benefits that the client is due.
So in essence, it could go back to, again, why there are 36 states basically that make a lot of errors because they count all of those errors, not, in terms of how it all happened, but they put it not in a fraud category, but a true error that somebody missed it or somebody didn't follow up on it as well.
Okay. Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct. And that is one of the roles of our internal program integrity team. When they are going out and when they are reviewing case files, they are looking for things just like that. And if we see a pattern, then we are going to address that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't know if this is for Deputy Director Keys. It's part of her slides, but I'm sure you know too. So my question, even thinking about errors and things, ABODs can only, if this is correct, only get food assistance for 3 months in a 36-month period.
Madam Chair, that is correct, unless they are working the appropriate number of hours per
20
week.
hours. And then and then for anyone at that point that is complying with all the requirements, how long can they get SNAP?
Madam Chair, so first I want to, the federal requirement for ABODs is an average of 20 hours a week. The Kansas requirement for ABODs is 30 hours per week. And it is a fixed 36-month period, and I believe the current period ends September 30th of this year, and then the clock starts again for a new period.
Okay, but then let's say they are complying with in Kansas 30 hours per week. And then anyone else, I see here that this is slide number 13. The length. So I'm just thinking now of length of time. Okay, sorry. Let me go back one more, back to the 36 months. They have to reapply, and there's all the same after they've gotten their 3 months and 36 months, and they have to reapply. So there could be more errors, or it's a whole nother application.
Madam Chair, yes, they would. If they do not have an active case, they will have to reapply.
Okay, and then just SNAP in Kansas, 63% receive for 1 year or less, and 35% receive for 6 months or less. But what's the limit? I mean, as far as receiving SNAP benefits?
Madam Chair, there is no time limit.
Okay, so it's
not-
just infinity.
As long as the countable income for the household is at or below 130% of the federal poverty level, they can continue to receive benefits.
Okay. And they don't have to reapply ever? Or how often do they reapply? How often is their application reviewed?
For most households, there is a 6-month interim report, so the eligibility period is for 12 months. At 6 months, there is an interim report form. It's a very short form that is sent, and we are asking basic questions. Are you still employed here? Have your hours changed? Have you moved? Because if you've moved, then we likely need to update your rent. So we ask those basic questions, and then we would continue your benefits for the next 12 months. For the next 6 months. At the annual review, that is basically a whole new application. We're going through everything all over again. The review form is very similar to the application for food assistance only, and we are reviewing everything just like we would at initial determination.
Okay, and I know we talked about this in the Welfare Reform Committee, but if someone becomes eligible, they fill out everything, they get benefits. It's for 12 months, except for maybe this little thing in the middle with 6 months. But what if, at the end of 1 month, they get this fabulous job and they no longer fall under that income requirement? They still get the benefits for 12 months?
So, Madam Chair, no. In the notice that we would send to a client that says you have been approved for benefits for this amount of money for this period of time, we also give them a specific dollar amount based on the number of individuals in their household. And we tell them, if your income exceeds this amount in a month, you have until the 10th day of the next month in which you exceeded that income to tell us.
And is there any way to check up on that other than people just self-reporting?
Madam Chair, it depends on the type of income. So, for example, if it's Social Security, we are going to know that because we would get that.
I understand that.
What would happen then, though, is at the 6-month interim report, when we go back and we look, wait, you got this job in month 2 and you did not tell us that, we would refer that to the fraud unit because now that is an overpayment on the client's half, not a DCF.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think that hits on the continuous eligibility. Is that right, Representative Carpenter, that we did not override?
This is
Separate?
That was Medicaid.
Oh, good. Good to have the experts on board. Okay. So before we pause here and give you a break and move directly to the fraud unit, I will ask you a question. We have a copy of the USDA letter that was given to Governor Kelly last year from the Biden administration that points out the deficiencies. And it lists those deficiencies. Did we get the letter that Governor Kelly received this year from the Trump administration? I'm assuming there was another letter like this, or no?
Madam Chair, I would have to see the specific letter. Is that a letter that is specific to Kansas, or is that the general letter that went to all the states?
It was from USDA. I missed that. And what she said. Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, I don't know that the governor has received another letter. I received notices from FNS monthly because we report to them monthly the status of where we are with correcting each line item on our corrective action plan. And so I will get a notice that says, we accept the update that you have provided. You need to continue to work in this area, or this solution does not meet the root cause of what we've seen. So I do get those notices, but I do not know that another letter has gone to the governor.
Okay, would you check on that? And if so, provide that to our research? That'd be great. And Representative Francis, did you want to follow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kept hoping someone else would ask my questions. I know we're trying to fix what's broken right now. What caused it to break? At one time, we ranked very highly across the nation in 2017. Regardless of COVID, it seems like our standing has dropped drastically since that point. What's the cause?
Madam Chair, if I may, I think multiple causes. Staffing has been a concern for us, and that's one of the reasons I believe Deputy Secretary Keys mentioned One Kansas. It's one of the reasons we moved to that model. So, for example, in the Kansas City office in Wyandotte County, we struggle hiring eligibility staff. And when I supervised in Atchison, we were always fully staffed there, and Atchison felt like they were busy if 5 people walked through the door. In Kansas City, we didn't panic until we had 200 people walk through the door in a day. And so just by using the One Kansas model, where Kansas City is not solely responsible for the constituents in Kansas City, Atchison, when they finish their work, they're going to pitch in and they're going to help Kansas City also. So by doing that, we've been able to, we've really been able to mitigate that whole staffing issue that we've had. Training has been a concern, and then we've had turnover. We lost individuals during COVID who never came back to the workforce. And so now we have to train. It takes at least a year to become proficient as an eligibility worker. There's a lot of information. So we've increased the amount of training. We've changed the training that we do, and really just tried to provide some supports for staff, reaching out to staff to ask them what they need, what are their concerns, so that we can meet those needs also.
So there's no real reason other than execution on why our performance has dropped compared to other states. The other question I have is, it seems like we are always at the bottom on this program access index. You know, I mean, what makes us different than every other state? Why are we always so low since 2017 on this program access index? What makes us unique, unicorns?
So Madam Chair, if I may, I believe Deputy Secretary Keys mentioned this. That is not a statistic that we track. It is not part of our program integrity, so that is only tracked by Food Nutrition Services. However, that is data that we could use to guide how we use our federal SNAP outreach dollars. And the purpose of those funds is to assist those in the community who may be eligible for benefits to know, what does that look like? We can pay helping agencies to help individuals complete that application online instead of having the paper application. I would have to take a deep dive into what other states are doing. I know what we're doing in Kansas, but I would have to look at what other states are doing to see where we may be different.
Okay, I just think 48 out of 50 states since 2017 is something that we could either improve on or we need to find out why. Thank you.
Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have a question on what appears to be a discrepancy in numbers, but maybe not. I'm looking at a February 8, 2024 letter to Governor Kelly from the USDA, and it says the most recent state reported data show Kansas at an APT, application processing timeliness rate of 88.54%. And if I'm reading this letter properly, that's for fiscal year 2022. But then I go to USDA document entitled Fiscal Year 2022 Reported SNAP Application Processing Timeliness, and this is the one that gives a chart, and it lists the timeliness of states from the best, which is Idaho, through to Kansas and on down to the District of Columbia, and we're near the bottom, and it's 74.03. So I'm wondering, those numbers don't seem to match, 88.54 and 74.03. Am I just not reading these properly, or do you know how to explain that?
I do not. So, Madam Chair, I would need to look at that, so that those should be based on the numbers that we are reporting to FNS, so they should be the same.
All right, thank you.
Yes, they are indeed two different numbers. So it looks like the letter gave us a little bit of an advantage there on what is reported. So, okay.
Madam Chair, if I may,
yes.
it could be that, so when we report our data, the FNS is looking at a rolling 3-month period. So it could be that what the number that is in the letter is from that rolling 3-month period and not the full fiscal year.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and invite Deputy Secretary Keys to come back up because I have an important question before we go into the fraud. And I think it's something that's very relevant to this legislative session. It was an item that was included in our Senate Bill 125, and that was the requirement that the administration make or submit a waiver for the soda and candy. And we understand that a waiver was submitted and the waiver was rescinded. And committee, I do believe you have a copy of the waiver letter. Is that correct, Amanda? I think we passed that out. Okay, so you should have a copy of that. And so I think what we'd like to know are a couple things. Tell us about the submission of the waiver. Tell us about the rescind of the waiver. And tell us about the plans moving forward relating to the waiver requirement in order to receive that EBT money.
Yes, thank you for the question. The waiver was submitted in error, and a few days later, the agency requested that the request be rescinded. Functionally, that's done through a portal that states have to submit documents and communicate documents. So that's the technical piece of how a document is submitted and then requested to be rescinded. Currently, we're working in our agency and also with the governor's office so we can plan and prepare for submitting of the waiver.
Okay, so you are planning to resubmit the waiver?
Yeah, we are evaluating so that we can be in compliance with the Senate bill requirement.
Okay, and I also would note that in the slideshow that you prepared, it said that the purpose of the SNAP program is for healthy diet and education on food preparation. So I think that that would fall right in line with a healthy diet. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree that the SNAP program does support.
No, I meant that not allowing candy and sugary sodas to be included would not be part of a healthy diet, correct?
I think there are interpretations of some of the definitions of candy and soda, but yes, there are some candies and soda that would not be considered by some as healthy based on their ingredients and content.
Okay, so, okay, well, all right, so Vice Chair Lewis, I thought we could all be in agreement that giving our 5-year-old a can of Dr. Pepper and a Snickers bar is probably not the best option for their health and nutrition. But anyway, I guess some might disagree because it has peanuts, maybe. I don't know.
Not a can, but a little bit in a glass.
Okay, all right, Vice Chair Lewis.
Okay, so I'm looking at I think this would be the original waiver request. I'm not sure it gives a date, but anyhow, it's signed by Carla Whiteson Hicks, is that her name?
Yes, Dr. Carla Whiteside
there we
Hicks.
go, okay. So, sorry that I didn't recognize that. I apologize, Doctor. But it does say that Kansas has, and I'm reading here, Kansas has seen the rise in obesity among its citizens, which has caused a health epidemic that includes diseases such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. These diseases can be linked to the consumption of soft drinks and candy with high sugar contents. Many studies suggest that prohibiting the purchase of sugar-sweetened soda beverages and candy with SNAP benefits would reduce the prevalence of obesity and type 2 diabetes. The risks and costs of obesity epidemic across this country and in Kansas are rising each year. The following statistics support this claim. Approximately 50% of all adults ages 18 and older in the United States will be obese within the next 10 years. Kansas is projected to have greater obesity rates than the national average during this time frame at 55.6% of the population. And it goes on, current estimates rank Kansas 12th in the nation for obesity prevalence, with 34.4% adults ages 18 and older who are obese, and 39th in the nation for childhood obesity, with 2.5% of the population ages 0 to 17 with obesity. And then it cites to a study by Britches, MP, Schwartzinger, Schmidt, TE, the state of obesity in Kansas, so forth and so on. So does the agency still agree with the assessment set forth pursuant of this study and in the letter that I'm reading from?
Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. We acknowledge that there is information and statistics and meaningful information out there about obesity and about other contributing factors to a healthy diet, yes.
Thank you.
And just a quick follow-up on that. So we often hear about food deserts, but all SNAP benefits, those individuals could go online and qualify. For example, Walmart does a fantastic job. If you have benefits, an EBT card, they will deliver them to your home, and I don't believe there's a charge for that. Can you confirm for the delivery amount? Can you confirm that or
Let me
not?
consult on the delivery question. I've confirmed there is no charge for delivery.
Okay, so we can all agree that through the subsidy program that we have ways to get direct healthy food to all Kansans that qualify to this program, correct?
Yes, I agree that there are ways in most communities that would have an ability, if delivery is available, yes.
Online, even if you have a Walmart an hour away, then
Yes.
I'm sure that might be a possibility. So I'm glad that we're taking a look at the health of Kansans, because I think that that also creates a high cost to Kansans when we have an unhealthy population. So I'm really excited to hear that the administration's going to, or DCF is going to submit that waiver. Any final questions, committee? All right, Representative Ballard, and then we'll move to the. Yes, well, Ballard and then Carpenter.
Well, just a quick one. I'm looking at your letter here, but does it really specifically say that candy and soft drinks are the cause of obesity? Or are they just one of the things? Because there's another study that I can bring in that talks about the amount of food that people eat and the kind of diet they have that could also contribute to that as well.
Amen, Representative Ballard. If you are eating lots of high preservatives, then that's not a good combination along with candy. But I think that the difficulty is where to draw that line. Certainly, if you're eating a high processed food, not being on the perimeter of your grocery store, it's going to have a negative effect. Any other questions or comments?
No, thank you,
Okay,
Madam
but-
Chair. I simply say if we're going to go back to the candy and the soda, we're going to have a lengthy meeting one of these days.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So one for no candy and soda and one for candy and soda. Representative Carpenter.
Just quickly, I'm not sure where we're at on this questioning, but I would be curious if research could get us information on how other states do eligibility. Are there states that contract their eligibility out as a piece versus having in-house employees?
That would be great if we could have that for our committee and our chair, regardless of whether we meet again. I think that'd be helpful for our chair to know that. Any of our chairs, I think we're heavily stacked with chairs in this committee, so that would be super helpful. One last note, I was going to mention this on one of our slides, and were you in the queue too? No? Sean, okay. One last note before I turn this over to Representative Tarwater. I did notice on a slide 12, which was on page 6, it's shared that out of all the SNAP households, we have 97,000 SNAP households. I thought this was a compelling number. two-parent households only accounted for 11%. And over in data from people that study economics, economists, single-parent homes is one of the highest indicators for poverty. Single-family homes. I don't have an answer to that, but this actually just backs that statistic that for the betterment of families in Kansas, if there are at least two guardians, it can obviously double your income, and we can see that right here because only 11% of our 97,000 households are two-parent. So that's a pretty astounding number. If we could get to the bottom of what's happening in America relating to that, I think that would honestly be one of the biggest potential advantages to fight poverty, is getting, families to stay whole. Anyway, a side note, Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of questions. First, on the work requirements, there's no real way to follow up to make sure that they're still working. However, we did pass a law a few years ago in the unemployment that when someone's on unemployment and collecting on unemployment and then get a job, they were to notify you of the person getting a new job, including the salary. Are you receiving those reports?
Thank you for the question. Is the question whether or not we're receiving the reports from the Department of Labor or the beneficiary?
When someone is taken off of unemployment because they have acquired employment?
Yes. Thank you for the question.
Okay. How many applications do you receive on a weekly basis?
Thank you for the question. How many applications do we receive on a weekly basis? We would be able to get that information to you. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, so I guess we've got 200 employees, you said earlier, in this vertical, and 97,000 people that receive benefits. It doesn't seem like the number of hours or the number of applications per employee equals about 10 a week. Is there a reason? Do they all work in the office or are they working from home?
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you for the question. We have a mix of individuals. We do operate lobbies in approximately 36 service centers. So we have lobbies, staff who are dedicated to lobbies. We have staff who are dedicated or prioritizing phone calls for that day or different pathways. Some individuals do have an ability to telework, but we have many individuals who are in the office and helping support those who arrive at our lobbies.
Okay. Just seems like there'd be a better way to have more efficiency here.
Yeah, I think you've highlighted something. I mean, if you just take a look at just the bare numbers, it does make you wonder.
Are they full-time?
Yes, most of our staff are full-time staff who are helping meet with clients. And SNAP is one program that we determine eligibility for. So we would additionally have cash assistance or temporary assistance to needy families. We receive child care applications seasonally. We might have the low-income energy assistance program. So SNAP is one program for which staff in the DCF service centers are determining eligibility. It's one of many programs that they operate. There are also employment supports programs and other ancillary programs around sort of a cadre of economic and employment services. SNAP is one program of many.
So would there be a way? It seems like the requirements to qualify are similar all the way across the board. Is there not a way that you can form some sort of matrix look at a person's application and say, they qualify for these 6 things?
In some situations, yes. Yes, there are ways to look at a whole person and all of their needs. Yes, there are some ways to do that.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, great comment on the technology. Again, we spend a lot on technology to try to be more efficient, and I'm wondering how that all, actually manifests in terms of, are we more and more efficient? Because in appropriations, it seems like every year we're adding new FTEs. So for some of those questions about the service centers and the number of contacts or eligibilities, it might be helpful, not necessarily for us, but for appropriations and social service budget. I'm sure that's been provided before, but you might start kind of collecting that. So if we do look for efficiencies in the future, that we would actually have some good data on that. And I think Representative Tarwater, if you take a second look at that as well, that would be helpful. Okay, Representative Francis, and then we're going to move to fraud.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And this question is your fault, by the way. So, as the Chairwoman mentioned, 11% of the households on SNAP are 2-parent households. It's slide 12, I believe, on page 6. Okay, 30% of them are 1 adult with children, so that gets us to 40%. And then we have 20% elderly and disabled. I mean, even in a perfect world, if those were all singles, that only adds up to 60%. What's the other 40% of households if they're not 1 adult with children or 2 parents with children or elderly and disabled? What's the other 40%?
We can get that information for the committee so that it yields 100%.
Yeah, they kind of ought to add up somehow, I think. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you so much for giving us the update, and I think there's a list of questions, and hopefully research can help us with those list of questions, and we can circle back. But let's go ahead and invite Mark, our General Counsel, Mark Altenburns, up, and this is your opportunity to ask your nitty-gritty specific questions. I don't know, Representative Sutton, if you have anything still on your list, but if you do, we'll start with you. Also, we have Dylan and Amanda. They're passing out what I was referencing before, and that is the fraud presentation, and got some numbers on there that might be really helpful to you. So first of all, I'll ask you, if you had anything that you've heard us discuss so far that you feel like you could provide some clarifying information.
I think it'd probably be more efficient to just get your questions instead of me trying to remember what everything's been said for the past hour or so.
Representative Sutton, do you have anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of mine didn't deal with fraud, but I do have a couple. I wouldn't want to disappoint. First off, thanks for being here, by the way. On slide 25, it was mentioned that there's a federal review. There are 1,800 case files. They're selected via an algorithm. Could you describe that algorithm for me?
I would not be able to describe the algorithm that the feds use to determine how they're going to review things, but we can certainly get you that information.
Well, it looks like DCF reviews a select number of household case files each month.
Well, the fraud unit does not.
Okay.
That's more of an internal SNAP audit, is my understanding. The fraud unit does not. The fraud unit does not perform those functions.
Excellent. Okay. All right. And I think most of mine went to on a program level. They didn't go into fraud itself. So I'll yield for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and then before we adjourn today, we are getting close, committee. Before we adjourn, I will give you that last minute opportunity to ask your final questions of anything that you may have missed. In terms of the fraud, are you able to update the information that we received? I think you just got that as well, so that we could see what that looks like in the most current years.
Yes, Madam Chair, I can update some of these numbers that I'm looking at right now. I see that the handout you have is from 2022. So in terms of SNAP referrals, in 2023 there were 2,555, and we'll supplement this with documentation if you don't want to write it down. But in 2023 there were 2,555 SNAP referrals. 234 of those there was a finding of fraud, so that's approximately 99%. 2024, there was 2,263 referrals. 271 of those, there were findings of fraud, so that's approximately 12%. And then so far in 2025, there's been 1,606 referrals for SNAP fraud, with a finding of 143 findings of SNAP fraud, which is about 9%.
Representative Sutton, and then Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to correlate that with the investigation results found on slide 21, where there were 121 in 25 and 226. Well, let's use 24 because that's at least a complete year. 2263, I think you said, were referred to fraud. 625 is different than the 226 and 79 that I have listed on this page. What am I missing here?
Are you referring to page 21?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
The figures on page 21 refer to the difference between.
In case they're looking at their detail sheet.
It comes down to the difference between those that have filed waivers, so they've agreed essentially to the fraud.
Right.
And then you've got for example, in 22, you've got 94 findings of conviction by Office of Administrative Hearings following a full hearing. So just so I'm clear, you're asking why 138 plus 94 does not equate to 305?
Yes.
Okay. We've had this. I guess the easiest way for me to answer that is to tell you that I will get you those specific figures. Some of these figures carry over from year to year, so that's one reason why the numbers don't necessarily add up. Another reason is because the Office of Administrative Hearings is very behind, typically, on issuing orders, sometimes a couple years behind. That's one reason why in 2025 there's only been 6 convictions as noted here. So that's another reason why. So there's reasons why sometimes the numbers here don't add up exactly. We can certainly get that information for you, but those are a couple reasons why that the numbers are sometimes a little bit off. It's just there's delays in orders from Office of Administrative Hearings, things like that. But we'll get you that information.
I would like that very much because, you know, with regards to 24, 625 with 226 and 79, that's a big difference there.
Agreed.
And if that's entirely left to Office of Administrative Hearings, I think we have to deal with that. Now, the cases that are ongoing, is this just continued fraud continuing in our system that we're not able to handle because of some snafu, perhaps Office of Administrative Hearings?
Well, I would say I wouldn't answer that with an affirmative necessarily. It's not I don't necessarily know what you mean by continuing fraud. Do you mean one person or the same people continuing to commit fraud?
These cases that don't add up, are they continuing to receive benefits and continuing to defraud the system?
No, they don't continue to receive benefits while these are pending.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair, and then Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to make sense of this fraud document, I'll call it, that we just got passed out to us. And I'm in particular trying to make sense of the charts, or the chart that is, it says DCF collections of overpayments to clients, and it goes through from 2018 through 2022. And so just taking a look at 2018, I'm just trying to figure out how to read so if you look at the, food assistance, agency error, 291 cases, amount owed, 77,321. I take it that means the amount that was overpaid.
I'm sorry, Representative, what page are you looking at?
Well, it's page 4.
Page 4?
Yeah. It's a chart
These were referred.
Okay.
entitled.
Okay, I've got it.
Okay, good, 2018?
Yes.
Okay, and it says food assistance, and I'll just start with the agency error. 291 cases, amount owed, $77,321. That means there was an overpayment because of agency error of that amount?
Well, again, investigations is under my purview, so I
Okay.
would defer to Carla on overpayment specifically.
All right, well, we'll come back
Okay.
to that, but on there's the fraud, then there's a fraud in the 2018. And it says 70 cases, amount owed $226,796, right? That's the amount that was defrauded, if you would.
Correct.
And then but the amount collected was substantially more. And I'm trying to figure out does that reflect some penalties that were collected or interest or?
It may reflect interest. I don't want to give you a certainty on that. I would rather get you that information so that you have the correct information. I don't know as I stand here.
And then retained by the agency, this was the 20% that you get if you?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Then if you go to, go to 2022, food assistance, that's the last page, the fraud. In this case, the amount owed is somewhat larger than the amount collected. And I take it that's just because you for instance, get a judgment of some sort and you can't collect it?
Correct. Just getting the judgment, unfortunately, and this is the same in probably any collections in any case, getting the judgment is one thing, collecting it's another.
Right. Okay. If I might then go to the doctor and ask her about the error information. So once again, let's just start on 2018. The food assistance, the agency error, 291 cases, amount owed 77,321, and then amount collected is substantially more, 292,616. Just trying to figure out how that works.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, this is likely, and as was stated, we will need to go back and verify, but that's the amount that we collected during that year. The actual judgment could have been from a prior year.
You mean the amount owed?
Correct. The amount owed could be from a prior year, because that's when we established those households.
I see. So this is on an annual, it's an annualized, so you don't, it's only what you actually brought in collections for that particular year?
Correct.
A cash basis, essentially?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Representative Hoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you help walk us through what all is considered fraud? Is this all recipients? Are there retailers? And are there other individuals that are kind of preying on recipients?
Well, I would say the majority of the investigations that we conduct are on individuals, because that tends to be the referrals that come to us. As we've spoken about before, our main referral sources either come in through our telephone hotline or our email hotline, and through the email hotline is a lot of other agencies reporting potential fraud to us. And so most of those folks are going to be individual recipients. Are there going to be providers out there, a gas station or something that might be doing something that violates SNAP rules? I don't know. I think I can probably assume yes. But to specifically answer your question, the overwhelming majority are individuals.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then with that, the referrals that we're getting, and then we see the numbers of the waivers signed, those who agreed to the fraud, and then moving on through the hearings, it seems like a lot of the referrals end up not being credible. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, that's a fair interpretation of the figures.
Okay, committee, we're going to get close to wrapping up. Thank you, sir, for your time. We're going to give you one last opportunity to ask a final question of anyone. So you may have a seat, sir.
Okay.
And so yes, we'll open it up to everyone. Remember, the underlying question that brought us here today is why is USDA demanding more efficiency from the state of Kansas? And so we were able to look at the trends of where we are on error rate and find out, are we improving? Are we on the right track or not? We have some more information that we requested that we can still provide to the committee. And if there are further audits, then I will note that our chairman of Legislative Post Audit is in this committee as well, and we have not finalized all of our audits. So if you have something that you see here, then, and actually there's 4 of us on that committee in here. If you have something that you really would like to dig further in, then please take it to the chair or one of the members. So having said that, your question could be for any of those that provided testimony today, and thank you so much for being here. Hope Representative Howard feels better. But these questions could be anything at all related to the SNAP benefit program, something that you did not get answered. So I will start with Representative Ballard. If you just keep it to 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll make our way around the room, and then we will hopefully adjourn by 4 o'clock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have one question. When you get a complaint, I'll just follow up on that one about fraud. Do you investigate every complaint you get to find out if it's credible or not? And then I'll follow up on that. You do?
Yes.
Okay. So if you say you receive 650 complaints and you investigated them and you take 150, do you then indicate so that we know that all these others were not credible? Okay, if you saw all of them, do you say they weren't credible and these are the only ones that you decided?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, the ones that, we indicate that they're not credible, if that's the language you want to use.
Yeah, or whatever you say it is. Because a lot of times when people have the complaints, they'll think, oh my God, look at all of this fraud, but then you investigated and it was not.
Well, yeah, we receive reports or allegations of fraud that after looking into them, they turn out to be false for whatever reason. There could be misunderstandings, there could be out-and-out misrepresentations, who knows?
Do you follow up with those individuals?
That reported the fraud?
Yes.
I would probably have to get you a better answer on that. If the question is, do we follow up with the people that reported the fraud that turned out to not be fraud, I'd have to check on that.
Yeah, because I have a little concern about that one, because in that case, do you have the same people having these complaints against individuals? And if you don't follow up on it, it's sort of like they could be ruining somebody's reputation or doing a combination of things, but it's not legitimate. Or do you just say, you just dismiss it, or do you follow up with them by saying we did not find a cause or something like that?
No, that's a fair question. Obviously, we have a list of the referrals we receive that would include a list of who made the referral and who the quote-unquote target of the investigation is. And if it turns out to not be an accurate statement, by default, we would necessarily know who that complainant might be. And so we have that information. Whether or not we follow up on it specifically to answer your question, I would have to get you that information.
Okay,
and I'm happy
thank
to
you.
do so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Any burning questions the committee would like to know? And of course, we will also end on any final comments, takeaways. Representative Sutton and then Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was mentioned earlier that in the collaboration with Food Nutrition Services, that utilizing new technology was in play. Is that a software program? Is that something that was already appropriated? What is it we're talking about on that new software?
So, Madam Chair, the new software current, that is what allows us to better manage the workload. Other software that we have been able to purchase recently are bots. So we have a registration bot. So when an application is entered into the system, the bot automatically registers the application. So that's less time that staff would have to spend doing those tasks, and they can be determining eligibility instead of things like that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on that, sorry, psych. Was that a software program that was appropriated? Where did the software program come from?
The funds for the 800 licenses that we would need across the state was appropriated. So we have those funds available to us in state fiscal year 26.
26? Okay,
Yes.
so it's not implemented yet?
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is a question for whomever would be most familiar with drug testing. Thank you, Doctor. As you know, there are different provisions of the law that require drug testing. For instance, I'm reading from a KLRD January 15, 2025 memo, and it says where there's, quote, reasonable suspicion that a person's using controlled substances, then there's a test. And I'm wondering, does the person have notice of that, or how does that actually work on the ground?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, that is primarily for the TANF program, for our cash assistance program, where we have a suspicion-based drug testing requirement per Kansas statute.
So how about for SNAP? Nothing? Or
no.
There's no drug testing requirement?
We would, so as part of the application process, like one of the things that we will look at would be, say an individual indicates that he or she was terminated from employment because of drug use. At that point, we would investigate further. Do we need to assign a representative payee, an authorized user for that case, because this individual may not be able to be responsible for their food assistance benefits on their own. But the drug testing program that we have is specifically for TANF.
If I might just follow up. Yeah, okay, that's helpful to know. I'm reading from the same document, this is page 9, and it talks about as of July 1, 2015, if someone has a felony involved controlled substances, then to get back on SNAP, I believe they do then have to do drug testing. Is that
Correct.
right?
That is correct.
Right. And do you know how that works? As I said, on the ground, what do they come in regularly? Is it random? How is it that they're notified to come in for testing?
So we do not do the testing ourselves. We contract with an agency that does the testing for us. And so yes, the individual would be notified in writing that they are required to submit to a test.
Right. One reason I'm concerned about this is we did have hearings, I believe, session or two ago in Judiciary about there are what I'll call masking agents out there. You can relatively easily find them. They're legal in Kansas, and that will mask the evidence of drug usage. So it's just an issue that troubles me that we have drug testing requirements, but it's easy to circumvent those. Do you have any comment on that?
Madam Chair, if I may, and that is a primary reason that we do not administer the drug test in-house, because we are not the experts in that area. So that's why we contract with an agency that will do the drug test for us.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we do have one second question from Sutton and then Representative Hoy. And if there are no other questions, I'll end with one question, and then we'll have last-minute comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something you said just brought up this question in my head. You said 800 licenses, but we had heard that there were 200 employees doing it. What's the delta there?
So it's not just the eligibility workers who will need these licenses. We also need the supervisors who are in the field, the case readers who are in the field, the training staff in the field. I need staff in administration who have licenses also on my data team and things like, so it's more than just the eligibility workers. And we have roughly 200 eligibility workers available every day for processing. We have more positions that are currently vacant. So we want to make sure that we have what we need to be able to hire new staff.
So approximately how many of those are vacant?
I do not have those. I would have to get that for you.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was asking about the referrals on fraud and the actual cases, I didn't quite get to this, but I would be interested if we have a number for the percentage of actual fraud from those recipients that are receiving benefits.
We can certainly get that information for you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, if there are no further questions, this is our opportunity to wrap up with any comments. This was an our first meeting, as you know, for our select committee, investigative, to get our feet wet in the process, to ask good questions and try to get answers that will benefit us in our other committees. Are there any comments? And then I did have one other question, but we're going to go to comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some people looked a little perplexed when I asked about, did you investigate all of the complaints you get? The reason I asked that question is because if you look on the handout we had, it says calculate hours per investigation. Hours of investigation, they spent over 33,912 hours investigating and and found a lesser number. I asked that question because that's a lot of money if we calculate how many hours they spent investigating, and you may have a repeat all the time, but I just wanted to point out that that's a big expense for investigation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and certainly we want a return on our investment, so I understand that's a very good point. Representative Camp, were you? Yeah.
I'll just be real quick. Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the fraud investigations, we discussed that a lot in the Welfare Reform Committee, and one of the things that did get brought up consistently is, sometimes it's a good thing to not have a lot of fraud found, but the important thing about looking for fraud is it's also a preventative measure. You don't want a lot of shoplifting, but that doesn't mean having an officer on site to prevent it is a bad expense. And so a lot of the fraud investigation is also looked at as a preventative measure. And I think even though there may not be a return on investment, because we find a lot of fraud, it's actually a good thing when we don't find fraud. But I don't think that's a justification of eliminating the investigations. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, point well taken. Other items, I just noticed in all of the statute requirements, there's a requirement that I think dated back into 2015, 2016 from the HOPE Act, which included having a photo ID. It was one of those things that is in statute, and I think at one time there was a waiver that was accepted from the federal government. It wasn't fully played out. We don't do this. But there are other requirements if I look at all of the statutory requirements. And so I'm thinking in terms of legislative post-audit or other committees that deal with DCF, whether it's appropriations or the list of items, how do we know that we're following all the statutory requirements? And I just gave you one example. We're not doing it. There may be really great reasons why the photo's not being used, or at least giving the individual the option of having the photo. But there's a whole list of items, whether or not, what's your status in Kansas, your working status, and other eligibility requirements. And I think in that since I don't know if we have a good answer from today, how we know that we're following statute and that we are eliminating the maximum amount of waste. So I think those are questions. Those are my only comments. Any other comments from committee members, from experts? Yes, Representative Sawyer.
I just want to point out on that first one where we talk about Kansas has been 48 since 2017 because of the program access. It appears to me, based on what the deputy director said, that calculation is based on one factor, just income. So based on income eligibility, we have a lot of people that aren't getting SNAP. But the legislature over the years has set a policy of trying to make sure people do not stay on SNAP benefits for very long. And so to me, that tells me that that number is a success for what the legislature wanted. So I think we look at that number backwards. The legislature's purposely said don't want people on SNAP, and we're succeeding there. I mean, I think it's a...
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think that was what we were trying to drive at initially. What are all the variables? Why is Oklahoma higher? And what are they allowing? And all of those eligibility points. And I bet we could have KLRD spend months or a legislative post-audit months on trying to figure out all the differences and why. But it's certainly going to change the amount of our total expenditures and reduce our total expenditures. And I bet if you look at it in real dollars compared to how much, considering inflation, maybe we're spending less now than we did before those changes. I don't know, Representative Sawyer. But anyway, Representative Francis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not convinced that that is the answer, but that might be a legislative post-audit thing if we don't get some information on the methodology. You know, there may be something funny in the methodology where it's exactly like you said, Representative, that it's the requirements we have. It's just, I find it strange that it's been that way since 2017 as we continue to change some of our requirements. But I do think, and one of the things I'm concerned about, I think this is very fixable. The original question, why we're here, is why have we had this correction letter from the federal government? And I think it is very fixable because if we look at these efficiency and effectiveness measures, I mean, we've dropped off the cliff from being 6th in 2017 for the per program to 35th now, from being 21st on the APTR in 2017 to being 33rd now. And then on the CAPER from being 7th in 2017 to being 34th in 2023. And I just don't feel like I ever got a good answer about why those have really dropped, other than we're not training our people right, we have some shortages, and maybe that's all it is. But just a thought.
Sure, and I would think that those would be the same problems and the same dilemmas that you would find at any state in terms of staffing and training and turnover and just whatever our unemployment rate is, and it's hard to find people. So I agree, and maybe, Mr. Chair, in LPA, you can suggest an audit that would follow up on this and give us the more information. It wouldn't necessarily be something that we need to do here with our select committee. That would be, of course, up to LCC, not us. However, some of these items could be tackled in other committees. Any other final concerns, comments, or requests? Everybody is so quiet. Okay, please make sure you give me your payment voucher. I will sign it with my pink pen. Representative Francis, yes.
So, Madam Chair, on the question of the, yeah, sorry, Representative Francis Shannon, but anyway, yeah.
Oh, did I say?
That's okay. Sorry. The payment error rate, I think for me, just in the meeting today, that discussion was very good. One, we have an executive branch at the federal level that's trying to take the national debt seriously. We're trying to reduce the overspending each year and hopefully get that under check and maybe even start paying off a little bit of the national debt. Wouldn't that be great? But part of that is driven by federal spending. These are federal dollars. I think it's a great motivation for Kansas to do our part to reduce the fraud the overpayments there of the federal dollars. And so setting that goal of 3%, in 26, I think that's an excellent goal to shoot for. And one final comment on the turnover of staffing. I guess a question is, what do we pay staff? And this can be followed up later. And what would be the amount to pay staff in order to reduce the turnover? Because it's very hard to maintain a high quality of staff that doesn't make the mistakes if you're turning them over quite frequently. So sometimes you take a look at return on investment, paying people better is a good return on investment because you don't have the turnover. So I'd like to take a look at those numbers eventually, just what would it take to not have the turnover? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I think that's a great suggestion. With Chairman Waymaster here and others that are on our committee, it would be very helpful for your suggestions of what would make a difference to save the state of Kansas more money and to provide more efficient and accurate services. I think that would be everyone's goal here. And so I would just ask that we not walk away from today's meeting without actually maybe providing back some feedback to this committee through research so that we can know best when we meet again for appropriations or any of our other committees how we can tackle some of these challenging issues. So if there are